Hello folks, and welcome to this week's review. Now, this week's review focuses on a pair of speakers. These are a pair of budget designs from Wharfedale. They're called the Diamond 12.1s. They live in the Diamond 12 range, and they're positioned sort of next to bottom in terms of price, and that price is £249. You can pick them up at Amazon and a range of hi-fi outlets for that price. These are stand-mounted designs, and I'm going to go a little bit into the technical side and the design side, but not yet. If you want to quickly zip over to the closer look area and also the sound quality tests, which follow right after, if you want to get stuck into that now, you're welcome to do that, and I will put a little indication, a little timestamp on the screen, and you can fast forward to that point and you can bypass what I'm about to say. But before we get there, I want to talk just a little bit about the history of Wharfedale. I want to talk a little bit about China, and I also want to talk a little bit about a bloke named Karl. All of these factors, these three factors, I think have a bearing on this review. I think they are important for this review, and I think they may answer a few questions, especially if you have issues with Wharfedale. Now, to me at least, Wharfedale as a brand smacks of tradition, history, reliability, and there's a certain solidity even about the name itself. The name Wharfedale gives a sort of dependability to anything that it's attached to, seemingly. And maybe part of the reason for that tradition and that dependability is down to its history. This, after all, is a brand that's been going since 1932, when a certain Gilbert Briggs built his first design in his basement in the market town of Ilkley in Yorkshire, England. Ilkley is a market town built by the River Wharfe, a part of the world generally known to this day as the Dales. In fact, 3 or 4 years ago, I almost moved there to Wharfedale, would you believe? It's a beautiful place. It's a lovely country area. Wharfedale itself, at least the Wharfedale I was visiting at the time, is in a high-sided valley, beautiful scenery and isolated houses dotted hither and thither. It's not the easiest place to get to. You probably need a 4x4 or a solid, reliable car at least. But living in Wharfedale, hey, it's the obvious place for any audiophile to live. And people who complain about Wharfedale not being Wharfedale and not being the true Wharfedale, well, they kind of forget Wharfedale, the real Wharfedale, ceased to exist in 1958, because that's when it was bought by the Rank organisation. Now, Wharfedale toddled along quite nicely, and in 1981, the very first Diamond speaker, the very first one, was released. And I think I may have the odd Diamond image in my archive to show you. And I'm sure I can pick up a Diamond speaker image or two in their original, rather interesting and colourful box. And so the Diamond range was underway. Now, Rank sold Wharfedale, along with Leek and also Quad, to the Verity Group. Now, the Verity Group picked up those brands in the early 90s. And after a few years, they found themselves in financial trouble. Not many people were buying Wharfedale speakers at that time. And there was a problem now, how to make cash. And it was at this point that the brand suffered in terms of its identity and in terms of its respect, because oddly enough, this British company started rebadging cheap Chinese DVD players and selling them into Tesco's supermarkets. It wasn't a great image for Wharfedale at the time. Verity went bust, there was a management buyout, and very soon after that buyout, IAG bought the company, bought those brands, and a decision was made at that point to build up the Wharfedale brand and the other brands that it had also bought, like Leek and Quad, the decision was made to build those up in terms of hi-fi quality. It was going to infuse IAG, it was going to infuse these brands with hi-fi quality and not deride or degrade these brands, which had happened with Verity. Now that was back in 1997. Around 2001, the Diamond range was reissued as the Diamond 8, I think it was. The Diamond 8, around 2001, as I say. And the design improvements have been steady and continuous, and here we are with the Diamond 12 series today. Now, before I get to the design of the speakers, I'd like to address the China thing, because with IAG there's a China thing. Many people see IAG's Chinese connections as a bad thing, one that affects the brand name of Wharfedale plus other brands it holds like Leak and Audiolab, which are two other brands under the IAG umbrella. Now, from what I'm seeing and reading on the internet, it seems that some people have a weird perception of Wharfedale and IAG as a whole. There's a sort of thought that the products under the IAG brand are built in some sloppy, unprofessional, 2-bit backstreet Chinese factory. You know, the sort of place, the sort of factory that would make skin cream on a Wednesday, children's toys on a Thursday, and a pair of speakers on a Friday. The perception of IAG, because it declares that it builds its products in China, is akin to, I don't know, some sort of dodgy market run by equally dodgy geezers. And that really couldn't be further from the truth if you tried. And why is that? Well, that's because the hi-fi industry today, the modern hi-fi industry today, is a global market. It's a multinational market. Things have moved on since the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. The problem is most people's perceptions have not moved on along with it. So a lot of hi-fi companies have their home HQ in the original country, whether you're talking the UK or America or Germany or France. The actual owners may live and be born in completely different countries, whether that's the USA or whether that's Taiwan or whether it's Hong Kong or wherever. These same companies then will have a factory of some sort in China, a necessary economic requirement. Now, you might not have those details pushed into your faces because, well, let's face it, not every company talks about that sort of thing. Not every company wants to talk about that sort of thing. And yet, it happens. And actually, IAG should be praised for being so open about the fact and being so open about how it produces its goods. Even smaller hi-fi outfits, which are based in their home country and they spout patriotism by the bucket load and they have big flags of their home country on their website, well, you know, they will be sourcing parts from China and elsewhere. That's how you get these things done nowadays. But look, you really need to change your perspective on this. It's not where you're at, it's how you do it. The buck stops with the hi-fi company. Never forget that. The buck stops with the hi-fi company. What do I mean by that? Well, if you see a piece of shoddy hi-fi, don't blame China. Blame the hi-fi company for allowing that to happen in the first place. And really, if a product has been produced well, does it really matter where it's been made? If it sounds great, does it really matter where it's come from? Now, Wharfedale has a HQ area, centre, buildings in the UK in its traditional area in Huntingdon, which is a town in England. And the director of acoustic design, a gentleman by the name of Peter Como, very experienced, very knowledgeable, very nice man. I've talked to him on a few occasions. He is based in that office. Now, many other hi-fi companies in the world rent part of a factory to get their job done. They actually rent space. IAG does not do that. IAG has their own factory. Well, factories, really. They've just built their latest factory, a large establishment indeed, with their own staff, their own equipment. It's their factory. Now, when you're renting space in another factory, someone else's factory, it's harder to keep the quality control. So it's really a good idea to have a factory of your own. Now, IAG is a privately owned company. The owners actually come from a pro sound background, and they wanted to enter into the home market, which is why they bought these particular brands, Wharfedale, Quad, Leak, etc. And the great thing about the factory is that it has an enormous amount of vertical integration. So what's vertical integration? When you look at the pictures of the speakers here, basically they're a bag of bits. There are MDF pieces, there's all kinds of metal pieces, there's all kinds of polymer pieces. You've got to put all these bits together and you make yourself a speaker. But originally, they're just a whole heap of parts which all come together. Now, the great thing about the IAG factory is that 90% of those parts are made and built in the factory, in-house. They're not sourced. Now, most other companies buy off the shelf. They buy from lots of different companies and they bring their parts in from other companies and they put everything together, maybe with a few bits of their own, and they put their product together. In IAG's case, in these Diamond 12.1s, 90% of that design is IAG. Even the screws are Wharfedale screws. IAG's factory is such a sought after establishment, they even make, on the quiet, parts for other companies as an OEM. And you don't really hear much about that either. Also, in this current situation we are all in, the deliveries of IAG products haven't really been affected too much because all the parts, or 90% of the parts, are built in-house. So they don't have particularly shortages of any one particular part. Or if they do, there's less of them. So just think about that when you think of the Chinese aspect of IAG. Now, finally, before we get to the actual speakers themselves, I want to talk about Karl. Now, as I've said to you before, Wharfedale head honcho Peter Como is normally the man behind a typical Wharfedale speaker design, but not in this case. Now, Peter has his hands full. He's got a few very interesting products. Maybe I can talk about them in the near future, but he has those on his plate. He didn't have the time. He just didn't have the time to work on the Diamond series. So a very interesting gentleman was brought in to replace him. His name was Karl Fink. Now, if you like Q Acoustic speakers, if you've heard Q Acoustic speakers, if you own any Q Acoustic speakers and you think to yourselves, yep, I like the sound of those, well, you're listening and praising the work of Karl Fink, because Karl was the, I suppose you can call him the launch designer of Q Acoustic. When Q Acoustic actually started business, they started with the designs of Karl Fink. So if you like the 3020Is, which I do, if you like the 3030Is, which I do from Q Acoustic, again, you're liking what you hear because of Karl Fink. Karl, a German national, there's that multinational thing again, hey? Karl actually left Q Acoustics, 18 months, 2 years ago, So he's no longer with the company. He does have his own high-end company called Think Team, but on the low-end side, the more budget area, he used to work in Q Acoustics. He no longer does. Wharfedale grabbed him. Now, if I can use a football metaphor, to move from Peter Como to Karl-Heinz Fink is a bit like substituting Lionel Messi and replacing him with Ronaldo. That's how good these two guys actually are. So the Diamond 12.1s that I'm about to tell you about in a second, the 12.1s are a Karl-Heinz Fink design, which I find completely fascinating. Questions: how is this design going to sound? Is it going to sound exactly like a Q Acoustics design? Or will this Wharfedale bias change the Karl-Heinz Fink sound? There's an interesting push-pull there. The results, well, I found very interesting indeed. So let's get to the meat, shall we? And let's take a closer look. And welcome to the closer look section for the Wharfedale Diamond 12.1 stand-mounted speakers. And let's talk about the new drivers, shall we? They come under the moniker of Clarity, Clarity with a K. The main part of the 130mm mid-bass driver is polypropylene. Now, according to Wharfedale, drivers made from this stuff have, and I quote, a reputation in some quarters for sounding a little unexciting, a perception that is largely the result of mediocre engineering, unquote. Well, tell us what you really think, hey? So we know what's going to come next then, don't we? Top class engineering, perhaps? To make its Clarity drivers, Wharfedale adds mica to increase the stiffness, and apparently this helps to reduce flexing. A low damping surround was sought too for this driver. The Clarity diaphragms are driven by a magnet system with an aluminium compensation ring to, and again I quote, minimize the effect of variations in inductance as the voice coil travels, unquote. As for the Diamond 12 series treble unit, well, it has a 25mm dome made from a woven polyester film with a high gloss coating. The front plate is pretty darn flat and actually exposes the dome as much as possible. At the rear, well, you can see a rear mounted port. The actual cabinet has some what's called intelligent bracing to increase the stiffness of the actual enclosure. And that cabinet is made from sections of wood fiberboard of varying thicknesses to lower distortion. Now, the Diamond 12.1 speakers are set up for by-wire, with the upper terminals reserved for treble use and the lower terminals aimed at the mid-bass driver. Metal straps are included if by-wire is not required, and that's how I ran them in this review. The terminals themselves have a screw thread and will take banana plugs or spades, or if you fancy, burr wire. The speaker itself has a sensitivity of 88 decibels, but only needs an amplifier of around, well, 20 watts, I think, will get you by on these. Spanning 312mm by 180 by 250mm, each of the speakers weighs in as a respectable 6.8 kilograms. Oh, and before we get to the sound quality section, let's just reflect on a little bit of history, because there's been a bit of confusion about the name, the Diamond 12 series. After the Diamond 10 series, there came the Diamond 100 series, just to confuse everyone. After that, there was the Diamond 200 series, then the Diamond 11s, odd, hey, and now the Diamond 12s. So, some have assumed that the Diamond 12 is the 12th generation of Diamond series, but really it's the 14th. And welcome back to the sound quality tests for the Wharfedale Series 12, the 12.1 stand mounted speakers. And I began with a soundtrack from Ennio Morricone on the Cinevox label. This one is called, and I'm grasping at straws, but I'll give it a go, Metti una sera e cena. Apologies to my Italian viewers. This one is a melodic soundtrack and it features sweeping strings, female vocals, close mic'd percussion. There's some brass in there and acoustic strings. There's even a glockenspiel, a triangle, and some acoustic and electric pianos and all kinds of stuff. It's a really busy arrangement. Now, I wanted to compare the Diamond 12.1s with other comparably priced, there or thereabouts anyway, but comparably priced stand-mounted speakers that it might compete to, that might attract your attention if you're looking to buy. So I began with a pair of monitor audio speakers, a pair of bronze 50s. Now, as you can see, the bronze 50s look a tad smaller and, well, I don't know about you, but maybe not quite as well finished as the Diamond 12.1s, and frankly, that's how they sound. Saying that, I'm being relatively picky because I actually like the bronze 50s an awful lot indeed, and I would be more than happy living with them on a day-to-day basis. There's nothing actually wrong with the bronze 50s, but the Wharfedales do offer a grander, more abundant sound. So where the bronze 50s go, the Diamond 12.1s tend to go 1 or 2 steps further along. So in bass terms, the Wharfedales have a much larger bass presence. The Diamonds are generally neutral in sound, but there just seems to be more of it. There seems to be more sound available to it. So the Diamonds are fuller in bass, but there just seems more information and detail around the mid-range and the treble. The bronze 50s can be a little reserved and simplified, whereas the Wharfedales are the exact opposite. The sonic complexity from the mids gives the Diamond 12.1s a sense that there's much more going on around the soundstage. You find your ears darting here and there to get it all in. The extra information around the lower end also provides more presence for those demure details that can be easily missed. The extra solidity and self-assurance from the Wharfedales means that the sound impresses you. At least in this comparison, the Diamond 12.1s make music a more memorable occasion. So I had a quick listen at a pair of Q Acoustic speakers. As we're talking about Karl Fink, I thought it was rather apt. So I brought in a pair of 30-20Is. Now the 30-20I speakers are broadly similar in terms of how they compare to the Wharfedales. Similar, that is, to the bronze 50s, in a roundabout sort of way. Yes, the Q Acoustics provide a slightly warmer comparison than the bronze 50s, but the Wharfedales give the sound a greater poise. The Diamond 12.1s infuse the music with charisma. The Diamonds alerted my ears to a slight lack of relative detail from the 30-20Is. This despite the fact that, once again, I would happily live with the Q Acoustic 30-20Is. No problem at all. They are excellent speakers. I'm just talking about the comparison between the 30-20Is and the Diamonds and how they compare and contrast with each other. And on that basis, the Wharfedales just move the sonic quality up the ladder by a rung, maybe even two. So I decided to give the Wharfedale Diamond 12.1s a greater challenge. I brought in another pair of Q Acoustic speakers, this time a pair of 3030Is, and there is, I think from memory, only about £20 worth of difference in terms of price between the Wharfedales and the 3030Is. This test was going to be critical. And what hit me first? Tonal balance. Tonal balance all over the place. It was quite an event from the Diamond 12.1s. So what we have here from the Diamonds is a speaker design that infuses the soundstage with a suite of relatively rich bass frequencies that carefully snuggle up to the mids and the treble without imposing or dominating or swamping them. So the detail remains, the delicacy in the treble is there, the detail from the mids too, but now you have a rich presentation because the bass adds an additional dimension to the music as a whole. This tonal balance adds a sense of maturity to the overall sound. It also encourages a sort of layering. You feel that there actually are sonic layers. You feel you can hear this layer of music and you can hear something going on underneath. There's a sort of richness about the presentation. You feel that now bass has been properly integrated into the music. Subtle aspects of the soundstage are now better formed and solidified, easily recognizable in effect. This enhances the transparency because even shy areas of the music have a more confident air about them. Strings are full and slightly warmer, acoustic guitar strums had more body and resonance, and cymbal taps had greater weight. If I was to compare these speakers, the Wharfedale Diamonds and the Q Acoustic 3030Is, if I was to compare them to a pair of amplifiers, I would say that the Q Acoustic 3030Is sounded to me like a Rigby Brio R, and the Wharfedale Diamonds really had an Audiolab 6000A quality about it, which is intriguing because Audiolab, that house sound that Audiolab has, obviously that's an IAG thing. Now, you've got Karl Fink here from Q Acoustic. This is the guy who produced the 3030Is. This is the guy who produced a sound that has a Rigby Brio feel to it. And when I say that, I mean heavy emphasis on quality mids, excellent upper mid detail, superb treble, and enough bass to give a foundation. There's enough there. Not a great deal, but there's enough. On the other side, the Diamonds, well, there's that tonal balance. So, I don't know, there may be a touch less extension in the upper mids, maybe, but you don't really notice that. In fact, you don't notice that. What you notice is the integration of the bass, sort of just like fitting, like I don't know, like a piece of machinery or Lego or something, but it fits nicely into the whole sonic presentation. So you've got bass, you've got mid-range, you've got treble as equal partners. Equal partners. They're all taking the same amount of space in your head. They all figure equally. And this gives a much more balanced overall sound. It also gives weight to those instruments which are mid-range heavy or treble heavy. It adds purpose and weight to those instruments. Surprising amounts, actually. And while we're talking about bass, well, the Diamonds absolutely love rock, by the way. Playing Thin Lizzy's We Will Be Strong from the album Chinatown, the Wharfedales felt supremely solid, weighty and powerful in the bass. On this track, there wasn't the high-powered, fast and impactful strike. What this song provided was just a deep, heavy kick drum thud that shook the room's foundations. Well, shook as much as a pair of stand mounts can shake, at any rate. But look, the bass effect, at the very least, was massy and strong in its application. There was a definite aspect from the bass. There was nothing wishy-washy here. Even so, detail, delicacy and fragility never left the building. The essential neutrality from the designs remained to give you everything you needed from this title track. Playing the title track, the essential neutrality from the designs remained to give you everything you needed. An emotional insight from the lead vocal, soaring flight from the lead guitar, an enchanted transparency from the drums, and a steady flow from the bass guitar. The bottom line here was balance, but balance that maintained the essential impact from the performance. This music had soul, it had spirit, it had passion. The Wharfedales egged on music. Go on, my son, it said. So how do I conclude the review of the Wharfedale 12.1 Diamond Series speakers? You know, back in the 1960s, there was a UK Prime Minister, a Mr. Harold Macmillan, and he famously said, "You've never had it so good." And I'm here to tell you that in terms of budget speakers, you've never had it so good. Because I would be happy, more than happy, to live with any of the speakers I've mentioned in this review in my permanent setup. What they each give you is top table performance, but they all basically sit at different facets of the same diamond. They all give you something different and unique in terms of sonic style and choice. And I love the fact that choice is out there ready to be selected. But I've got to say, the Wharfedale 12.1s, they really surprised me. Before this review, I wondered if they could keep up. I wondered if they could handle the competition. Well, they certainly put that question to bed. And how? The Diamond 12.1 speakers provide a balanced and neutral sound, but the way they integrate bass into the suite of detailed upper frequencies while maintaining all of the insight and information you might expect and want adds a touch of genius to the overall design. In terms of my expectations, the Wharfedale Diamond 12.1 speakers have provided me with the sonic surprise of the year thus far. They excite and delight, that's true, but they also add a little drop of magic into the mix that really demands your attention. And that's me done, folks. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this video, and thank you too for your support. And if you would like to continue supporting me, can you do me a little favor and just click on the like and also subscribe buttons. Check out my Patreon page, please, because it has a host of exclusive material. There's buyer's guides, there's exclusive videos, and all kinds of written features. Have a check if you can. Also have a look at my website. I'll put a link below. All kinds of editorial there you won't see on this site. There's also a Facebook group I'm running, and you're welcome to join that if you wish. There's other links in there too. Have a bit of a scan, see what takes your fancy. I will be back next week with yet another video. Don't know what I'm going to do right now. I'll have a think. What I'll do, I'll post it in the little tab, the community tab just below here. So don't forget to check in for the next review. Until that time, folks, bye bye for now.